A very pleasant morning to all my dear students. Today it is 27th of April 2021. It's a Tuesday. So again we are here with our English online class. As in the previous class we had started the explanation of first page of the story A Triumph of Surgery, written by James Herriot. Written by James Herriot, right? So here we can say that in this page we can see that how the Tricky, the pet dog named Tricky, when the narrator or the author saw Tricky, he was shocked because the dog looked very hugely fat. It looked like a bloated sausage. So James Herriot was shocked to see, and he instructed his mistress named Mrs. Famfrey, that do not give such food. As Tricky was very much interested to eat more and more food, he likes to eat malt, cod liver, chocolates, cream cakes, everything. He never refused it. It shows that Tricky itself was a greedy animal. Okay, but Mrs. Pomfrey always pampered Tricky. That is why it become very bloated sausage. Understood? It become a bloated sausage. And due to this, Tricky become inactive. Tricky become inactive or dull. It means it doesn't have energy in its body. So this is a problem for Mrs. Pomfrey. So when he contacted to Mr. James Herriot advised to give some exercise to Tricky also at the same time. Then its body will be perfectly okay. Otherwise, gradually, slowly, it become dull. It becomes sick, ill. Right? So here, Mrs. Pomfrey used to always pamper Tricky and gave lot of food to it. And Tricky never refused it. He also used to eat at the same time. And this causes a great serious problem to Tricky. This much we have already completed. Now we proceed to the explanation of our next page. Okay? Now today we will see the explanation of page number 2. Right? Here it is, picture is there, isn't it? It is Tricky along with his mistress, Mrs. Pomfrey, and he is Mr. James Herriot. Let us see. I try to sound severe and I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. So here, Mr. James Herriot, the narrator, tried to talk seriously to Mrs. Pomfrey that if she did not control Tricky's eating habits and increased his exercise, he would soon fall ill. Right? He would soon fall ill. He told her that she should stay strong and strict with him and put him on a diet. Mrs. Pomfrey wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Herriot. I am sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off, head down, along the road as if determined to put the new recipe into practice immediately. Then Mrs. Pomfrey accepted that, although she knew that Mr. Herriot was right, but it was too difficult for her to refuse him for anything. But then she left the place as if she was now ready to follow the new routine properly. I watched the progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along with its little tweed coat. He had a wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on, for dropping in his harness, I thought it would be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. So here, Mr. Harriet was watching them go and looking at Tricky's walking unsteadily. The narrator was also looking at the tweed coat that Tricky was wearing. He had a wardrobe full of these coats and also raincoat for the rainy days. This line suggested that Mrs. Pumphrey was a rich lady as she had a lot of money to spend on her dog. But the narrator knew that soon he would be receiving a call about Tricky falling ill, and it came. The expected call came within a few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting. Didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. So, Mrs. Pumphrey was, the call came after a few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was very upset as Tricky was not eating anything, not even his favorite dish, and he was vomiting frequently. He didn't even want to do anything. Being a veterinary doctor, the narrator knew that the only way to get Tricky was to get him out of the house for a few days. He then suggested to Mrs. Pumphrey that it would be good to get Tricky hospitalized and keep him under observation for at least 15 days. The poor lady almost swam. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailings. I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. So the narrator thought that it would be best to avoid any delays and get him to the hospital as soon as possible. He went to their house, and even though Mrs. Pumphrey was crying because she did not want her dog to go away from her, he took the dog, wrapped in a blanket, and put him in the car. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowls, lunch bowl, supper bowl, releasing that my car would never hold all the stuff. I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. So here we can say that the writer here, Mr. James Harriet, the maids were woken up and asked to get off Tricky's stuff. His stuff including things like his day bed, night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, isn't it? Breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, snack bowl, everything. Mr. Harriet knew that so much stuff won't be fit in his car. So he started rushing things. As the doctor was leaving with Tricky, Mrs. Pumphrey threw a coat, Mrs. Pumphrey threw a coat, and it was just Tricky used to wear in the car. As the narrator was turning the car on the turn, he saw through the rear mirror that everyone was crying. Everyone was crying. He petted the little helpless animal, who responded by wagging his tail. The narrator then thought that and told Tricky that he knew that Tricky did not have any energy now, but he surely had a way to get him better. So, student, this is the explanation of page number 2 and some part of it page number 3. I hope whatever we have discussed, read the chapter thoroughly, understand the word meaning, try to find out also. Okay, then you can better understand what is there in this chapter. I hope whatever we have discussed, it must be clear to you. Thank you and have a nice day.